Have you seen this material? It's being used a lot more in landscape designs. It's called DG, or Decomposed Granite, and basically it's just crushed up solid chunks of granite. It varies in color depending on your supplier's quarry and where they get it from. There's a lot of applications to this, and a lot of people have asked about the pros and cons of it. Now, you want to make sure that you're putting it in a fairly flat location because it can wash out. You wouldn't want to use it in a spot that has a lot of runoff, or say under the eave of a house that might not have gutters, because it will wash out quite a bit. The other thing is, this isn't really appropriate to put up near your house. It tends to get on your shoes, and if you track it into the house, it's not the best thing, especially on hardwood floors that can really scratch up those floors. We've chosen to install it here in our concept garden because we are looking at a flat space. A few months ago, we started this project, and you don't have to take that long, but we looked at really wanting to remove this Bermuda grass, and depending on your timeline and also your patience will help kind of play into the timeline to install DG. So we needed to identify our boundary. We didn't want to have any spaces that were small that we needed to weed eat or get a mower in or anything. So we looked at starting over on our west entrance of our concept garden, and we put a curve along the front of these smaller containers all the way to our south entrance of our concept garden. This ties these gardens together, and it makes a nice contrast between the vegetation and the DG. Here we're using just natural DG, which is just simply the aggregate. There is also DG with a stabilizer, and basically that's a binding agent that's mixed in with the DG, and you could use that on areas that you might get a little more traffic, such as paths, or something that has a little bit more slope to it. It'll help stabilize that a little bit more. There is also a DG that has a resin in it, and this is going to bind those particles together even more. It still allows for a porous surface, so the water will drain through it. Not quite as well as just your natural DG, but it's a great DG to choose if you're using it for a driveway or something that really needs to be stabilized even more. We used a regular garden hose to help define our curve, and a garden hose is a great way to kind of play with the shape a little bit. Again, we decided on using a nice gentle curve because it's easier to get a mower in here instead of having to work with any right angles. Now, after you have your curve designed and you're happy with those lines, what you're going to want to do is pick up that garden hose, and as you do that, spray paint that line. Once you have the garden hose safely removed so that you don't have to ruin it, you're going to bring in the sod cutter and remove the sod in the space where you want the DG to be. After we've got the sod removed, we're still going to need to spray that Bermuda grass. We gave ours a couple of months and it continued to grow back, and so we sprayed it about 3 times with glyphosate over the time period. Again, depending on your own timeline, you can speed up that process or not spray as often, depending on your preference. After we have that done, and you can see now that our sod is removed, we're going to install our metal edging. Now, this is the typical edging that we use here at the studio gardens, but if you wanted to use a paver or a decorative stone or brick, you could do that, and it would give a little fancier look to your DG patio. This edging is really nice because it's simple to install, and you get about 7 linear feet of bed edging in one piece. Now, it does come in lengths, and it actually has short stakes that are attached to it that we've broken off here. If you want a longer stake, you're going to have to buy that separately. And these longer stakes are nice just to really stabilize that bed edging as it comes in. As I said, these little pieces are locked in here, and they break off simply and pretty easy with some pliers. And the reason why you're going to need to break those off is because they interlock. And this, again, is what keeps your bed edging solid throughout the whole length of the bed edge. What you'll do is just install these stakes, and we're following our turf because we've already got our line determined, and you're going to hammer these down in. You can see that that locks those pieces together, and the nice thing about this edging is that every 2 feet, about 2 feet, you have these holes, these slats where you put these stakes through it. And you don't have to do them all right away, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility if you need to hold certain curves. We're just going to kind of do every other one initially and then come back. You always want to make sure that you come back and do put stakes in every one of the holes, and that just ensures and reinforces it a little bit more. So now that we've reached the end, what we're going to do is grab one of our pieces here, and obviously it's too long, but we're going to go ahead and measure how much of that length we need and then cut it off with the Sawzall. So you can see here we've got some drip irrigation that we don't want to use, we don't want to encroach on, so we're going to cut it right about here. So we've got our last piece secured in, and we just want to go ahead and finish that, but I wanted to show you a couple other pieces that you can get also. So on our cut edge, sometimes that can be rough or a little bit sharp, and this is a nice finished piece that you can get that will just stake over that last piece and finish it off. If we had bed edging along the back that we needed, then there's also angled pieces that you could get that cover both ends this way. But for this, we're just going to use this piece right here, and that's all we need to do to finish our edging. Now, there might be some other pieces other than a mallet you might need, and this bed edger was a really nice piece of equipment to cut that groove to put your edge, your metal edging in. The other thing is this bed edging is about a 4-inch height on it. Now, if we were doing this where it backed up to a flower bed, we wouldn't be as concerned about the height here. In fact, it would be nice to have that edge to weed eat against. But because we're looking at doing a space behind this edging where people are going to walk, we want to make sure that it's low enough that there's not a tripping hazard. But at the same time, we want to keep a little bit of a lip to it so that the Bermuda grass doesn't quickly just grow over it. Now, if you're finding that your bed edge is a little high in spots, here's a little trick. You can get a piece of 2x4 or 2x6 and then your mallet and hammer it down in some of those locations and slowly work some of those high spots down. For the next step, we're going to need some landscape fabric, and the heavier, the thicker the material you can get, the better off you'll be. You'll also need some landscape stakes, and these just will act as staples to staple it in the ground. And you can see here we've got it all completed now. And so because this is a light traffic situation, we're going to just start applying the DG. But if it was a heavier traffic path or even a driveway, you'd want to put a nice base of gravel down first. But again, since this is just a light area, we're going to go ahead and start adding the DG. You want to put the first layer down about 1 inch and 1.5 inches thick. And as you go along, you want to moisten it a little bit. It's almost like the texture and the consistency of brown sugar, if you will. And so as you do this, you want to compact it, and that moisture in there will help kind of interlock it a little bit more. Depending on your timeline and your situation, it is best to give it a few hours to kind of solidify and bake some of that moisture out, and then come back with another couple of inches and compact it once more. You can see here the area that we're doing is quite large, so we've actually rented a compactor. Now, if you're doing a smaller location, you might want to just get a hand tamper, and those work just as fine. They just might wear you out a little bit if you're doing a large space like this. Now that we've installed the final layer, we really want to make sure the top of this is smooth. And you can do this a couple of ways. You can just use a hand rake to rake it smooth, or you can also get a piece of chain link fence and drag that behind you, kind of like what they do on baseball fields to smooth out that gravel. That usually works best in large open spaces though. After we've got this all smoothed out and brought up to grade, Really, the only maintenance that's required is occasional weeding. And again, you can do that by hand or you can spray it out. And then the other thing is, as time goes on, you'll notice low spots, but it's nice to keep a pile of DG over off to the side to fill that in. You might just need to do a little top dressing occasionally. Other than that, this is a great low-cost solution for creating a nice patio.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.